Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to this week's episode of Getting Live with Josina Wines. Today, we are going to talk about the lies that wines tell. Okay, so wine label lies. So it's kind of a cool thing, or well, maybe not a cool thing, but there are things that are on labels that are pure marketing tools that really mean absolutely nothing. Now, there are a bunch of stuff that is on that label that is absolutely mandatory by the government, and it does tell very specifically what is inside that bottle. But there are other things that really do not mean anything, and the winemaker can call it whatever they like. Okay? So that is what we're going to talk about today, those wine label lies, or the lies that wines tell. So the first one is actually going to be when you're looking at a label and you see a grape variety on it. So this is our 2017 label for Cabernet Franc. This is our classic Cabernet Franc. Now, it is a Cabernet Franc because legally, by definition, it needs to have 75% of whatever that grape variety is in it. That's the legal definition. So when you're looking at something and you see that there is a variety name on it, that it is a varietal wine, then you know that it's at least 75%, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is 100%. So for example, our 2017 was 95% Cab Franc and 5% Petit Syrah. So there can be other varieties in that wine, and we still can legally call it the varietal. So in the United States, the government allows it to be 75% of that grape variety. You are able to call it that varietal. So keep that in mind, and sometimes, that's where those text sheets come in. Some wineries are going to put it directly on the label, okay? Others do not. Now, we do not, because then every time we go to make a vintage, we have to get that reapproved because of what the wording is on there. So it's just easier to keep it as that varietal, okay? So text sheets are wonderful in that respect. The next thing is alcohol content, that beautiful thing that we love called fermentation. Okay, so in a bottle, legally, okay, if the wine is under 14%, then that winemaker can label that bottle 1% in either direction. Okay, so just because you're looking at if you're looking at something that is 14.2%, and I think I said under, if it's over 14, I'm sorry. If it is over 14%, then that goes into a different taxing classification. And what happens is that we are allowed to do 1% variation of the alcohol. So if you're looking at 14.2% on the label, it can be anywhere up to 15.2% alcohol. Now, this is not to give you more alcohol than you're thinking or to tell you it's less alcohol so that you buy more of it. It is literally because of how the winemaking process occurs and how the wine gets into the bottle. So we need to order labels, obviously, prior to bottling, and there is a lag time for that. And in today's world, there is even a larger lag time between that. So because we can't do a final blend until it gets closer to that bottling time, the government actually understands that we need to order the labels before we get that final alcohol content right before bottling. So that is why we are allowed that 1% variation in there. So it's not to try to trick you. It's not to do anything like that. It literally is just for logistics, right? We need to order labels before we bottle. So we are allowed that 1% over the 14%. Okay, so that is a wine label line. Why? Now, next, one of my favorites is reserve. Okay, there is no legal definition to a reserve wine. And we say this all the time when we pour our reserve wine. Now, the thing is that a reserve wine is something special to that winemaker. So it can be anything. It can be from a certain block. It can be from, they just thought this vintage was phenomenal and they want to call it a reserve. Now, this is not true in other countries, right? We do have Reserva wines in Spain, or these wines do mean something. Those terms do mean something in other countries. This is just in the United States. A reserve means absolutely nothing other than that it is something special to the winemaker. Now, for our reserve Cabernet Franc, the reason why we call it a Cab Franc is because it is a single clone, single vineyard designated Cabernet Franc. So we actually harvest these grapes. We keep the grapes separately in different barrels. We taste through those barrels of that clone. We we pick which are the best barrels for us, that vintage. That becomes our reserve. Then all of the other barrels get mixed together to become our classic Cabernet Franc. So for us, that's the meaning behind a reserve. Okay. Now, the other thing is like one of the things about that we tell when you come taste with us is that we actually pour our reserve before our classic. And most wineries are going to pour their reserve last. They're going to say, okay, here's our reserve. This is the last wine you're going to get. We pour ours ahead because it is 100% Cabernet Franc. And it is a more delicate wine. And we feel that if we poured our reserve after our classic, that you're going to miss some of those nuances. So it gets poured first. It's a more delicate wine to our palate. So again, reserve means legally nothing in the United States. Any winemaker can call any wine they like a reserve. Okay? So choose for yourself if you think it's worthy of that name. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is another fun one. It's called Old Vine. Now, Old Vine, once again, does not have any government legal definition. Now, there are some regions that are designing their own regulation, like Lodi rules. Lodi in California, they are designating their own stipulations to what makes an old vine or what makes an ancient vine. That's them doing it on their own within their region. Their wineries agreeing, this is what we're calling an old vine. This is what we're calling an ancient vine. Okay? But by the U.S. government, there is no definition to what an old vine is. Now, why do winemakers put old vine on it? Mostly you see it a lot with the Zinfandel and Carignan. Okay, as the vine gets older, it gets all gnarly, and how it produces the fruit, the production actually drops to lower levels, which means that there's more intensity in the berries that are produced. So it can produce a different wine versus a younger vine. Okay, so that is why winemakers do put old vine on it. But legally, by the U.S. government, there is no definition. Now, one of the funniest stories that I've ever heard about old vine occurred long before we started Dracaena Wines, and we were out in Napa, Sonoma somewhere, and we were tasting, and this one winemaker had poured the wine for us, and he's like, yep, this is my old vine Zin. And we're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's great. Like, where is? He's like, yep, it's my old vine because I planted these vines one day before I planted those vines. So this comes from that block. These are my old vines in. Okay? And I just thought that was hysterical, and it stuck with me. I don't know how many years, ago that was, but it just stuck with me. But so those are the lies that wine labels tell, and I hope it was a little educational for you. And in the future, if you have any requests of what you would like me to talk about, please leave me a comment. Give me a little nod to let me know that you would like to learn something, and I'd be happy to share that information with you. In the meantime, please enjoy the wine you are with, and we hope that you check out Dracaena Wines. Remember, our wines plus your moments equals great memories. And we will see you here next week. Sláinte!